Welcome everybody to our webinar tonight with Dr. Joe Tafur, Spirituality and Psychedelic Healing. My name is Jamie Harvey. I'm the Executive Director of PRATI. We are a not-for-profit organization based in Fort Collins, Colorado. We have a key purpose, reconnecting to the sacred, self, community, nature, and spirit. And it's a great honor to have with us here tonight, Joe Tafur. But before we get going and I do my little introductions of Dr. Tafur, I thought I'd just start with a little bit of gratitude. First of all, grateful to all of those who registered for this webinar and made a contribution to support our not-for-profit mission. Also grateful for this planet that has brought us and gives us gifts every day, gives us food to eat, nurtures our soul, gives us air to breathe, water to drink. So with that, I will shift my gratitude to Joe. Thanks so much for being here. I know you're on a different, lot further south than those of us here in North America, Joe. I think you're back in your native soil. But just a quick introduction for Joe. Dr. Joe Tafur completed a 2-year postdoc research fellowship at the UCSD Department of Psychiatry. And in 2011, he helped to found Rural Centro Espiritual. That's my mix of French and Spanish accents, Joe. A traditional healing center in the Peruvian Upper Amazon. At Rural, Dr. Tafur underwent traditionalist apprenticeship in traditional Amazonian plant medicine and Shipibo curanderismo. With his colleagues, he also started the not-for-profit Modern Spirit, dedicated to demonstrating the value of spiritual healing in modern healthcare. Dr. Tafur continues to lead journeys to Latin America to experience traditional Amazonian plant medicine and ayahuasca curanderismo. And I'd also be remiss in saying, because I think I'm going to pull a couple of things, but also the author, I think if people can see, The Fellowship of the River. And what a beautiful book, Joe. We're putting, we put a link to Joe's book, if people want to support PRATI and independent bookstores, so in the link below. But what an absolutely beautiful book, Joe. It just, oh my goodness. You know, we've met through your work as, through your role as a board member, but there's something about your writing and your personal journey just touched my heart in so many ways. I think I've been working within the integrative health sphere in many ways, but I think what you did for me, at least, was really take this notion of holism, right, of body, mind, spirit, and really make it come alive. So it wasn't just the words, right? It wasn't just the words, but it was how it felt in my body when I read it. So deep gratitude and much love to you for the gifts that you're bringing into the world. So thank you for that. There was a piece that you wrote, was that reconnecting to your bodily senses also involves reconnecting the mind to your internal sensations, how you feel inside your body, your heart, your gut, and throughout. The sense is called interoception. We experience our emotions through these sensations. These internal sensations also inform us about the physiologic condition of our body. Like, wow, what a, those are words, but I can kind of feel it as well. But you also describe how you wept with gratitude after your third ayahuasca ceremony, that you wept in gratitude, that the ceremony brought you back to the soil of your ancestors and the ceremonies that somehow reconnected you to your roots into the earth. And you didn't know how much you're aching for it. And I'd offer that what we see in our ketamine-assisted psychotherapy trainings and throughout really Western society, there's this deep ache for something, for a spiritual hunger. And you really brought it to life. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Gene.
Yeah. And I have a question, though. I think, you know, many people, I believe, are feeling very lonely, feel that they're alone and not connected. And there's something in this American dream, the American story about rugged individualism. But when you think of holism, we're all connected. And that's the gift of psychedelic medicines and really being part of a living planet, right? Because everything is connected, right? We're more non-human cells than human cells. But you had so many mentors in your book, in the Fellowship of the River. Kevon, Ricardo Amaringo, Paul Mills. Can you speak a little bit about what it means to have mentors and
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jamie. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see Jason and Scott and all these people here. And good to see you. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I'm in Colombia, South America right now, bringing my mom here because my aunt is 80 and is like, has end stage renal disease and is being offered dialysis. But now she doesn't really need it, but they say she's getting close. And she says she doesn't want it, if it comes to that, she won't do it. So then I'm here for that. And then I'm also going to go and see some people in Colombia because I'm also looking for mentors in Colombia. And so just on that note, like mentors, yeah, I think it's like, this is the first thing that you brought up, the interoception. And I mean, that was my ketamine experience with you all at PRATI, was just becoming my sensorium, like I said, like it's the consciousness becoming like the lived experience of the consciousness is like the sensorium, that's what you feel. What you feel is like, that's pretty much what it is. That's what it feels like to be alive. That's kind of how you determine how it's going or what's next for you. I don't know. I think so. And ketamine was very much like that for me. And then it's like, but then you're talking about the book and for me, when we get into so then there's this mystery and this connection and all the amazingness of feeling connected and being connected to something bigger or to nature, even like rugged individualism of the early or like American, the pioneers, they're living with nature. It's not like rugged individualism where it's like you don't care about anything, you stare at your screen. It's like you're actually, the sun coming up, the sun coming down, and the rain and everything else is a huge part of your life. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the history of the American dream. And so that is, that's alive in a lot of places that are more country or more rural or more rustic or more wild. Colombia, there's a lot of that here. There's a lot of people that still, that it really makes a difference. What's happening in the natural world around them. And so I just think it's just an interesting guy, like the mentor, this is what it makes me think of, because this is what I said when we were there at the PRATI training. And then, sometimes when you can get into that space, that's like just the kind of the stripped away, metaverse, the very fabric of the universe, and it's then people could say that it seems kind of amoral or non-directional or, it just, you could get lost, I guess, without some kind of support. Like it doesn't need a direction. Maybe it doesn't have a direction, but there can be one. When I commented when we were at the training, I said, because somebody was talking about that, how they felt that kind of amoral sense. They tapped into that field. And I was like, well, that's what's so beautiful about nature as a mentor, because nature is existing in that same void, the empty of the empty of the emptiness that you've ever experienced. With the tree, knows that way deeper than you. An hour on ketamine, like still like, oh, how about 2,000 years, standing still. And so the nature is such a beautiful mentor. And that's why, like, when I think about, and I'll talk on these other people, but when I think about it, it's like the book for me, I mean, it's so nice, Jamie, that you appreciate it so much and it touches you that way. Because for me, it was a very sacred thing. It was just really, there's so much room for the mystery. There's so much room for different ways of seeing things and, spirits or plants or what do people believe or they don't believe. But I was steeped in it. I was living in the jungle, steeped in the Shipibo tradition, ayahuasca ceremony 4 nights a week. And I was receiving a lot of messages, from nature, and there's a lot of room in that space for you to project into it and make up your own thing and get confused and bring ego into it, and or somebody else confusing you. But this idea that you could be mentored by nature, is a part of the tradition. It's the root of the tradition. The root of the tradition of like a lot of the Native American teachings is that Mother Nature is the best teacher. And so those things that help guide you to be in touch with that guidance, there's something very special about that. And so along the way, like Kayvon, let's bring in those people. Like Kayvon was just my buddy from medical school, from college. Kayvon, I met him in college, and then we kind of disappear from each other's lives. And I ran into him in medical school. Was not expecting to see him there. Hadn't talked to him for a few years.
What's with that, right? How did that happen, right? What was
exactly? Well, that's part of life, right? Yeah, right. I mean, everybody can have stories about why do any of us hang out with the people that we hang out with? Paul Mills, who's now he's the director of research for Deepak Chopra. And at that time, he has a book. Paul Mills has a book that's coming out later this year, which is a very special book, which is about scientists sharing their own spiritual experiences.
Beautiful.
So when I met Paul Mills, just to kind of like I was like, doing different things, finished residency. I don't know. People were saying, you should do research, Joe. You're kind of into academics, maybe do research. And I had a mentor from medical school. A lady, Sandra Daly, was Panamanian. So another mentor, and she was like, Joe, yeah, go for this research. You can get it as you're Columbia. They have special, I don't know that I really warranted it, but it was a minority research fellowship that I had access to from the NIH. And so then there's another friend of mine knew Shamini Jain, who was at Paul Mills' lab. Now Shamini's in her own right, doing big things with energy healing, and also does some work with Shift Network and Deepak. And Shamini, we used to all go surfing together. And they're like, yeah, Paul Mills, he's a really spiritual guy. He's like a meditation guy. And, you should go check him out. You should go talk to him, and you can do research over at that lab. And I had some ideas that I wanted to do, but I was at a very interesting point in my life where I don't know why, but I had been to Peru already, I guess. And then I was like trying to figure out what to do. And I went to go talk to him, and he was still kind of like, he wasn't where he's at now, he wasn't able to live like, so we had our own interview, and it was very nice and very pleasant. He's a very deep human being. I mean, you can really sense it talking to him. And then at the end of the conversation, he's like, so what do you think? I'm like, well, my friends tell me that you're a very spiritual man, and that's actually why I came here, And so then he said, it was like, he's at the UCSD Department of Psychiatry in that time, whatever, 2007, a few years ago. And he just like, well, peripherally, I'm here at the university. That's kind of peripherally. So I was like, well, peripherally, I heard that you were,
But it's interesting though, because I think it feels as though we're scared to talk about spirituality.
Yeah.
And it may be because in this country, people confuse spirituality with religion, right? And I'm also, as we talk about Paul and this and your conversation about spirituality, I also want to make sure that we have time for you to like truly share what you want to share tonight, right?
Right.
And so and maybe that's the Fellowship of the River, right? And more, but I just
I don't want to get off track too far, but the point is that you were asking me about that, and my point was like following guidance, And so at that point in my life, I felt in my heart that I wanted to be closer to that. And and it's like you said, the religious trauma and all these different reasons. And Paul Mills talks about, like, that's what his new book is about. He's like, you know what? Science shouldn't be choking spirituality. It should be supporting it, which is kind of what it is doing now. With this research supporting gratitude research, supporting mystical experience, supporting compassion, supporting, all these things, psychedelic science. is just, it's happening now. But for a long time, it was people felt like strangled or held up by it.
Or
And
it felt like it was a competition between the two, when really you can have science and the mystery at the same time.
well, because science was their religion, and that's what it is. And so then, like any religious person, a very fanatical religious person, they get upset because your belief system is really, this is the biology of it as I understand it. Your belief system is quite intertwined with your emotional apparatus. That's what we understand. That's what we come to know from this kind of medical work, that, how you believe, it really is, it's tied up in, your emotional system. And so when somebody attacks your belief system, a lot of people get really upset. They get really, they get really upset, especially if they have a lot of like unprocessed, emotional issues that are sitting there. And so there's a lot of that, and so the science is full of that, sadly. I don't want to get carried away, but it's not a place where it's a place where you can run from that. You can run from vulnerability, in science, and you can run from vulnerability in corporate America, in high level leadership in academia and politics. And so it's not a place where people want to talk about, they don't feel safe there to talk about what's hurting them. And then to really get at like people's belief systems, you have to be able to talk about vulnerable things, So just to like segue over to the Fellowship of the River, and what I want to do, just for PRATI, and since people are here and some of them already heard me talk before, is just be present, to the group and see what we want to talk about. But as I would relate it to my work, so then I went to it's been a big block of my time was in Peru and studying Amazonian traditional medicine and ayahuasca ceremony, which are people healers. And my teacher Ricardo Amaringo, and one of the things that I would see a lot when you're there, and so there it's a little different, and so we could see it like ketamine within the larger, the real context of like, okay, let's say a 6-part series with therapy around it, not just one experience or just one weekend ayahuasca. The idea is like, if people are coming down for 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to have a retreat, to really go deeper. And they have a whole diet. They have to do all these restrictions, observe all these restrictions to go through the traditional way of doing it. With the traditional education is saying that if you want to have this spiritual, mystical contact, you should do it like this, as silly as that might sound. We can't make sense of it to you. Don't eat this, don't eat that. It's not because the biology or the biochemistry or whatever. You ask them, it's because the plants told us.
Yeah.
That's why. And so if you want to find out for yourself, try it. But if you just want to tell me I'm stupid and I don't know, then go ahead. But you're not going to get any closer to knowing what we're trying to show you. So then the idea is you go through the process. And so the people would go through the process, and I witnessed it, many times. People show up and have very kind of, let's say, closed-minded, feelings, beliefs around spirituality, around mysticism, around, supernatural phenomena, whatever you want to say, things that exist beyond the 5 senses that we experience. That's how Paul Mills defines it in his book, something like that. And so they would, a lot of times they come in the first ceremony, maybe it doesn't open up for them. They don't have a big experience, and that might happen again. There's people resistant to ketamine, there's just different factors that go into how some people can really open up to it and some people don't. And what that is, and for the shamans down there, the healers, it's all there, is that they're blocked, they're blocked from their trauma, from so many things. So that as we heal them, watch what's going to happen. So you go first ceremony, second, third ceremony, third ceremony. By the end of the week, pretty much everybody there is saying they talk to the plants. Like I'm talking 90%. And from all over the world, don't speak any indigenous language, don't have anything to do with indigenous culture. So it's not, so for me, there is something universal, to experience, but it's mysterious and it's beyond form. And so it doesn't follow any of the rules or any of the things you can hang your hat on. You have to feel it, you have to experience it. And it's through like love and compassion and understanding that you come into contact with that kind of stuff, and it doesn't always have the answers, and it's not always the answer to the, there's still larger mysteries involved, and I don't know what it is. So I just bring that up because it's just I see that the way my friend Adele France, who's over there in Colorado, and she does her research, and so she works with people, and she had her own journey, like kind of an awakening to spirituality through working with ayahuasca. And she says when she has clients going through psychedelic psychotherapy or stuff like that, she doesn't say, oh, they don't want to hear about spirituality. Well, let's not go there. A lot of times there's religious trauma involved. There's a family experience or something or cultural, societal. But she says, okay, well, let's not worry about that. Let's look at the emotional blocks that might be there, in the way to experiencing things like that. And we saw that very consistently, that once you help somebody, you like you say, like I like to say, you keep them safe, you allow them to be vulnerable, and you liberate them from judgment, with the space that you hold, then some of them walk away and say they talked to an angel, or, something happened just beyond their wildest imagination. And it's, so I don't know, those things, do we need to, there's so many pitfalls, there's so many reasons to be careful and skeptical, and that's very wise. At the same time, there's things for us there,
Yeah, there's this conundrum, right? Because we want to protect ourselves. And in some ways, the way we can best, maybe the word's not protect, right? But maybe heal, is to actually let go. But it's so scary. It's like floating on water for someone. If you don't know how to swim, you're on the water, and to let go. And for the most people, if people can relax into it and become, they'll do okay, right? But it's stepping into that mystery. It's stepping into that mystery. And I think we went for a walk, I remember a couple of months ago, and I can't remember if I described my experience. I wasn't on medicine, and the trees spoke to me, right? And for me, I think I was just ready, right? For whatever reason, I was on my path. And why am I bringing that up? I think it's maybe you describing people having enough medicine sessions where they can slow down and finally listen, and they become ready.
That they're open enough.
Who knows, right? But it's that opening to something bigger.
And that's what the Native American indigenous culture, a lot of cultures teach, is that if you quiet down enough, that then the nature sometimes tells you things, and so that's very, in their culture, that's very common. And I think all the indigenous cultures all over the world, it's anybody that lives anywhere in the country, any environment for a human being, you start to connect to it. You have an intuitive sense of how to drive to work, without thinking about it. And when you're living around plants and animals, then there's a field of consciousness, that you're all participating in.
Yeah, and there was that example of Carl, I think one of your patients in the book, right? And I think it was after 4 or 5 medicine sessions, he experienced love. Right?
Yeah.
And it created this cascade really of healing. But it was, in the way I interpreted your writing of that experience, was that he stepped into the mystery, into this big flow that of trust and an enveloping, love for
well, and as it turns out in his case, so he was a German guy, he's in his 70s. He's a meditation teacher. He's kind of like a personal growth coach. So he's a very experienced, person in life, and talking to him, a very wise, very sensible man. And he said he wanted to experience the spirit, that he had never really felt the spirit, and he thought, I heard that you all down here in the jungle could help me to feel that, And so then his first couple experiences with the ayahuasca was like, well, that's psychedelic. Like I saw some color. I've done that. Drugs, that's drugs. I did that before. That's what that is, Whereas for like people, like the designs and things that you see, like that's magic, that's energy, instead of just like, oh, that, because the other guy, it's just the same old story. Like he's going to explain it away to me, like what they understand about how you see things in your brain, which is kind of pathetic, like to tell me like, oh, I get it because they don't know how it works, to just get on your high horse and tell somebody this is what's happening. It's kind of ridiculous. But anyways, he's a nice guy. And so then, the first one, second one, and then third one, and then it was kind of funny because he's German. My buddy Marcus that works there speaks German. He's from the German part of Italy. And so I go over to tell Carl, I'm like, hey, Carl, how you doing? I'm like, you want some more? I'm like, maybe you could take a little more. He's like, that sounds so complicated because you have to like get up and walk over to the other side. And, he's an old guy. So then I told Marcus, I was like, hey, take care of your German uncle over here. Bring him some ayahuasca, walk it over to him. And then he drank it. And then he had his experience. And it's just interesting because of what you were talking about as far as like what was blocking him. Yeah. And that story is the story of he was asking, and his like, so in his full lucidity, he was having his conversations with ayahuasca. And that was his experience. And he asked ayahuasca, what is consciousness of consciousness? He's like, those are the kind of logical trajectories. And ayahuasca said, that's love. Consciousness of consciousness is love. And so they said, well, what is love? And then like they say down there, like, las plantas te muestran. That means like they'll show you. Yeah. Because that's how we understand a lot of things. The information is a lot faster sometimes in the lived experience. So it took him back to when he was born. So like as far as like what was blocking him, or it's like a very unconscious, subconscious, pre-conscious experience that had this huge influence on his life. It was like very difficult for him to realize that or to be aware of that, without some kind of, his meditation practice wasn't doing it for whatever reason, and like, so then ayahuasca shows him that he knew that his mom died after childbirth. He knew that. He was told that complications from the birth, that she died. But it was after several months, there was some kind of prolonged period. And then, but he didn't, I don't know, he never put any thought to it, or no one ever talked to him about it, that the possibility that he was next to her when she died, which made all the sense in the world. Yeah. That he would have been. But it never crossed his mind that he was. And ayahuasca took him to that moment, true or not true, whatever you want to believe, but it was for him to learn something very profound. And it showed him that he was there when she died. And then in that moment, in his like pre-conscious, whatever, in his infant self, just like so many other children and so many other people and so many other humans, his immediate like response was that he must have done something wrong. This is abnormal. This isn't normal. This shouldn't be happening. Like some instinct in him is like, this is not the way it's supposed to go. Your mom's not supposed to die right like this. And so he blamed himself somehow. Some profound process of guilt came upon him. That was his experience in the ayahuasca vision. And so then he realized that guilt had filtered his entire life. And all of his relationships, everything had been filtered by this guilt that he thought he killed his mom. Wow. And then the ayahuasca said, so then the ayahuasca shows him the story, right? So he's feeling all of that, right? So in that feeling, in the interoception, and that's where you make contact with the energy, okay? With the full swelling of his feeling, like, ketamine, like, whoa, You can't deny something is happening. In that place, the ayahuasca says, you don't have to, blame yourself for what happened to your mom. You have to accept that that's what happened to your mom. Love is the acceptance of all things as they are without reservation. And that was his message. And that's how he learned it, and that's how it came to him. So that was a beautiful, experience with a guy that was a very, so it was like, okay, he had a hard time feeling the spirit and all this kind of stuff. But you see, well, he has this trauma at the root of like feeling into his heart and soul. It doesn't feel like a good feeling to dig around in there from a very early spot. So I don't know, there's something to be said about that, and the role of like unprocessed trauma piling up in the society. When you have a society, now you have psychedelic therapy, now you have ketamine, but if you had a society where there was nothing that was touching into that kind of trauma in people's lives, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and no one's touching it, then you could start seeing how people would become kind of nihilistic and lose contact with the mystical, because once you start walking them down that road, a lot of them start bringing it up like, whoa, something really strange happened to me. I don't know. I see those things interconnected myself in my experience working with people.
Yeah. In some ways, I think you're touching on really integrating, right? You're like, how do you integrate that, the meaning making of, in this case, Carl's experience, right? And I'm curious about, and then we should open up for questions. I know. But what I think I heard you saying was that there are people who go down imagining with their Western mind on that they have an ayahuasca ceremony, and then they're kind of cured. It's sort of the pill for the ill. They just go down and that's it. And what you're describing is something that's totally different. And I do wonder with the transformation of healthcare, mental health, psychiatry, however you want to call it, with psychedelic medicine, if our society is still going to use that more Western medicine mindset. It's like, oh, I'll get some psilocybin or have an MDMA experience and that's it, right? They don't realize that there's the process and the integration that's sort of woven into it. It's not, it's not like popping a pill. Right?
No, but that's and it's not like popping a pill, is it? Like, so
No.
I mean, that's not as easy as that. A lot of people can trip out and have a lot of experiences and just keep on how they're keeping on. A lot of other people can't. A lot of people, you see these, the psilocybin research from Johns Hopkins, they're saying like 60% of them are saying that was the biggest
life-changing,
life-changing experience. So it is worth saying that. I mean, there are people that will blow it off and not put it to practice, but a lot of people will influence them. And then, like you said, integrating it and finding ways to really continue with practices that are going to bring the longer term improvements. Like there's no way around that. That's crucial. That's so important. So are people going to try to, I don't know, the people who don't want to get better, I guess, are going to do that, but there's some of them that do want to get better. And you see a lot of that, you're seeing people sticking around for 6 ketamines or whatever it is in the associated therapy because they want to get somewhere with themselves. And before, they didn't believe that you could really make a big shift like that such a change was even possible.
It's a fundamental, change in mindset of how one approaches healing.
And what is the potential of healing? I think before it's like you don't think they're going to get better. So you just kind of have a little experience and that's it. And that's the attitude. That's the attitude of the old fashioned way. But in Peru, like in the, down in the tradition, that's what I was turned on by. I saw people get better from things that they weren't getting better from. in our society, and long-term better, you know, like the cases I talk about in the book, they're followed out for years.
Yeah.
Each one of them, you know, some of them had, prolonged, they had to come back and, have big experiences over and over again. Some of them, somebody's trying to get in. I'm going to admit somebody.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe
anyways, my point is there's a potential for healing that we're opening up to. And I think that, prolonged ketamine stuff, MDMA, assisted psychotherapy, and traditional plant medicine, it's going to open people's minds to like, what does healthy look like? What is accessible to you?
Right. And we all have the internal ability to heal inside ourselves.
Yeah. But you need tools and you need support, you need a society that's going to promote it.
Well, maybe we should go to some questions, Joe. Should we do that?
Yeah.
Maybe we can try raising hands and see how that works. And I don't even know if I can see hands here. I don't know if I have to change my view or what. What do you think, Scooter? Why don't Scooter, can you take me off maybe or hide me? Oh, they'll show up on the participant list. So if people have questions, why don't we just start and we'll let Joe answer a bunch of questions here.
The bunch is flowing in.
Here they come. Flowing in, right? It's always the first one. People are a little nervous, right? It's like,
but this is, everybody's been through the training, right? That this is for people.
No, this is
PRATI for the community.
Yeah, there's people from all across the country.
Okay.
And I did, yeah. So if somebody wants to unmic and ask a question, feel free. Let's go for it. Oh, there's Ashley. You want to unmic yourself and have a question for Joe?
Hi.
There you go. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, great. Hi, Joe. My name is Ashley. I'm a nurse practitioner in Virginia, and I loved your book. I was wondering if you could speak to, there's a chapter where you discussed limbic revision and limbic regulation that that happened, where you discuss it in terms of it being able to happen within the ayahuasca ceremony. So you're talking, you're talking about it from the book, A General Theory of Love, which I ended up reading right after yours, and how that limbic resonance and revision and regulation happen usually between a patient and a therapist, or between two people who love each other. Could you speak more about how you see that happening within the ayahuasca ceremony? I found that so fascinating.
So just that was in the book, and just for the fun of it, like in the whole mentorship and the whole magic of it, I mean, the book is like what organizes the book is just me sitting down there and seeing what happens, like passes the chronology. And there was a lady that, I presented her case in the book. I call her, I think, Maria in the book, and she had like the repressed sexual abuse, and really heavy stuff, and had a big, she's still doing very well, still in touch with Maria. And so she's thriving, and she had all this body pain and was, going to have a knee surgery, a back surgery, and then, kind of PTSD, psychological stuff, but doesn't want to deal with it. And then she had this huge healing. And she went home to do this prolonged part of her diet that shaman said, you should keep doing this, stay on this diet for a few more months. And she found this book, and she brought this book, and she said, Joe, this is what you did for me. You guys healed my limbic system, And it was The General Theory of Love, which is an interesting book written by a few UCSF psychiatrists who are trying to evaluate, what is the best kind of therapy, what makes the difference in therapy. And the ultimate kind of summary point is just that there is love. The reflection of love is the key. And they break it down, the mammalian biology of that it's like, this is just a mammalian reality that you limbically resonate with in other words, you can tune into the emotional, being of your intimate loved ones. And that's very informative, for everyone. And so that humans just instinctually do this all the time, just even looking at a stranger. I mean, just looking at their face, you're going to get a lot of cues about how they're responding to their environment. Are they afraid? Are they calm? Is it safe? Is it not safe? And then that can go a lot further, right? with the best friend, you might be able to pull out a few sentences out of a glance, somehow, right? And so then there's limbic resonance. So the idea is, if you're able to, once you're emotionally in tune with someone, you've opened yourself up emotionally to them, and you're feeling each other's kind of feelings a bit. And you can do that with a dog, you can do it with a horse, mammals do it. And so you can do that, and then you can, revise, there's it's contagious. If your loved one is in a bad mood and they come home and they're, it's going to put you in a bad mood. If they smile, you might smile. If they cry, you might cry. And so then there's revision. It's like you try to, you purposely affect each other. You spend time with each other. And then it's therapeutic, in other words, reflecting love back to somebody while they're going through some process of a memory or trauma or emotional, something they have to work through. And so then by you reflecting love back to them through it, they learn to love themselves through it, kind of through contagious experience, something like that. So then in the shamanic kind of sense, let's say in the ceremony, so then we're training ourselves with ayahuasca, with plant medicine, to sit with somebody and in the dark, and to tune into them, to the best of our ability. And, and using the ayahuasca, for example, to learn to expand your consciousness while you're trying to do that, so that you might receive, so not only do I might feel something that you feel, but then I might get a whole story with that too, or there might be a dream type of metaphor, vision that had come to me connected to that experience of me trying to tune into you. And so, but that's a whole other, there's a series of, then when you're in the shamanic kind of a way of looking at that, it's an energetic exchange. So that you have to be careful about that, because there's a back and forth that's happening, because I'm picking up on things, that if I wasn't tuned in that way, I wouldn't, I may not, maybe you would, some people do, but you may not, unless you really concentrate and open yourself up to it. So then there's this idea of you have to learn how to manage that, and then in that connection, in the Shipibo tradition, then, with song, then you're inside of their being, because you're experiencing that. And that's how you're experiencing it. You're experiencing things that are coming from inside of them. And so from that connection and that access, you sing to it, So then you put energy right into that little dream, right into that little image, right into that. And you support, that whatever process would be happening there, And so it's something like that. So that's why I related to it in the book, that I said that it is related, and that there is room for that I think it is, in my experience, and it's not always the case, but there is a very advanced study of that. And we all are aware of energy healers and different people that do things like that. But I think it's really impressive sometimes, what you can encounter and what it can reveal and where it goes. That's happened to me over and over and over again. And so I associate that with limbic resonance, with tuning into the person. And so that's what I talk about. It's just like me and you, we're looking at each other right now, but it's here we are in the flesh, and then it gets converted into digital, and then it goes all the way to you, and then it gets turned into this image of me. And so the same way, it's here I'm sitting here, that person's sitting there. Somewhere in between us, there's a digital flow, energetic flow. And you can decode that sometimes, just like the computer is decoding the digital from the satellite. It comes down here, it can turn all that, whatever that got turned into, and open it up into this. It's the same. Signal transduction. That's what we call it, when things that phenomenon. And so in our perception, I associate it with that. But to make the most of that in my experiences is that you do that personal work on yourself so that you can feel into yourself to the maximum of your capacity, right? Like to be present as a practitioner. Ideally, you've felt into your insecurities as deeply as you can. So, or whatever it is, your blocks, your triggers, so that won't be in the way of you being able to feel past yourself. You know? Because it's like this, how the Navajo would say, you got to listen with your toes to really get a sense of what it is. So if you, but you to do that, you got to be comfortable with yourself enough all the way down to your toes to sit and be all that, you know, which isn't so easy, but that's what you try to do it. You strive in that direction, and that opens up a sensibility. You know, there's a capacity that's beyond your normal sensory capacity. But it involves your emotional apparatus, you know, is what I suggest, including the limbic system.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Jason knows what I'm talking about. I mean, I feel silly telling Jason, but you
know. Why don't we move to another question? If someone had a
you got one right there, Danielle.
Danielle. Is Danielle? Is that Danny or?
Yeah, it's Danny. Hi there.
Hey, Danny.
So I was watching the Sam Gandy webinar and the research that he presented, that the plant medicines are those that indicate a connection to nature, and that ketamine shows a decrease in a connection to nature. And since ketamine is what's available currently, the most available for people for somewhat of a non-dual experience, non-ordinary experience, do you have ideas of how in that, he said he felt it was because it's a dissociative. Are there ways that you feel we can experience and utilize the ketamine and have something within the experience or the holding space or with the provider that can assist that to be more connected to nature, or outside of it, get back to nature?
Right. Yeah, I think that I'm not familiar with his research, Sam Gandy. I just looked at it real quick on the internet, and so I mean, I don't know where they came up with it. What was the measure? Like nature connectedness? What was was that the measure they asked people? Did they feel connected to nature during the experience? You know, and so I would say, like, I went to the PRATI, retreat, and like in my deepest, like heavy ketamine thing, I did feel like it was very alien. You know, it was very. It felt just beyond. It didn't feel very nature, related to me. I mean, not entirely, but there was a concern on my end, like working with ayahuasca and just feeling like, my initial reaction was like, this is the illegal one. Like this one is the weirdest, this is so much that ayahuasca seems so like friendly to me compared to that, it was so, kind of, I don't know, it was like there was an alienness to it. There was just a depth of it that was just beyond like all form, so then you go past that stuff. That being said, by the end of it, like that was my concern in I want to connect my medicine to this. That was in my mind, my plant medicine stuff. So at the end, when I started coming down, then I was into that, and I was finding like ways to do that for myself. And then afterwards, the group and this, like the context, like we did it in the PRATI, retreat, which is in nature, a very nature loving crowd of people. So it was hard to believe that they was so like disconnected from nature, and just hanging out with everybody afterwards. People, I think, were way more interested in nature in the like post, state, including myself. And then the next day, it was the same experience. We did it outside. And so, and many people were talking about flowers and plants. And so, I don't know how they conducted that research. It seems a little bold. I mean, I get where that's coming from, but I do think there's a lot you could do to bring that. And that's what I said, because we had that experience in the next day. And I was like, well, the nature would be nice to have more nature presence, because it does get weird like that, where people feel so disconnected, you know, it's just so, it's so raw. And so I mean, there's different ways to do that. I told them, like, put a little more, like, you know, or like, don't just do pure techno. That's what I said the next day. I was like, you know, when it's just all techno, like, it just gets so video game and so weird that when I heard somebody, a human being's hands on a string, that was like, so it connected me, you know. And so I just felt like the nature music has some organic aspects to it, not always, but some of it, you know, there is room for that to be disconnected from everything. There's some really beautiful part of that non-directional that opens people up to kind of a judgment-free space. But I think having, you know, I think that you set up the space and you set up the energy. Like, for me, the energy of the people of the retreat was such that nature was present, you know, throughout. And so I don't think we lost touch with it. If you were just doing it in a clinical setting at Sam Gundy's lab, I think, yeah, it would probably feel a lot less nature connected than doing something else. So I think
don't know that it was Sam's research. It was something that he presented. But
so somebody's research.
Yeah.
No, and I hear what they're saying. I don't know. My experience is it kind of gets to this other point of like, is ketamine-assisted psychotherapy just going to become this weird alien thing that's going to disconnect people from nature? And people point to the infusion centers and, you know, all that stuff, but I don't see that's happening. Like, this is what that looks like. I'm on the board of PRATI. Like, this is what it is. Like, this is what ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is bringing into the world. There might be other forms that are popping up, but there's a lot of this, you know. I just had I'm doing this class for U of A, and so I had Scott Shannon and, you know, Veronica Gold of Polaris. You know, they're doing the presentations for the class, and it's very heartfelt. It's very beautiful. It's very human. So I don't know. I get what they're saying, but it is what we have. And so I think that's why it's so important. And while it is what we have, and it is very natural, I mean, even though I always ask everybody, where does it come from? How do they make it? Nobody knows. But it's a very simple organic compound, like very core substance, right? Like this ketamine, this ketone, and this amine groups. Those are like some of the most fundamental biochemical building blocks. So I hear what you're saying. And I thought the same thing. I even thought it while I was doing it. But afterwards, I was like, no, I could do that. And I walked away. I was like, I don't know if I could do that to somebody. You know, what I just did for their first time, like that they don't know. I mean, not that you wouldn't, you know, you'd come into it more slowly. At the same time, I do think that it can be very useful and it is important. And I do think that it can still help us connect to nature. And as I say over and over again, it's from the Harry Potter, you know, medieval tradition of chemistry. And that's what it's from. It's magic. People forget, but it's just like Shipibos, you know, they're still cooking on pots over the fire. So everybody thinks, oh yeah, these guys are connected, but that's what this is from, you know, just a little further back.
Thanks, Joe.
Oh,
I think
Elizabeth has her hand. Oh, go ahead. Oh, wait.
Yeah, let's go to one. Let's go to one last.
Danielle's unsatisfied.
Well, okay.
Okay. What was it, Danielle? Just real quick, and then I'll just make sure.
Just that what I'm hearing is what PRATI is doing is very important, and to be able to bring that together, and that speaking on that and writing papers on it as well, and expressing that, and especially in training clinics to get the fluorescence down and get the nature, perhaps we can open that up more for the general public.
PRATI's leading the way. I mean, they're put sacred in nature at the forefront of their mission statement when all the other people are still scared. You know, why isn't Johns Hopkins doing that with their psilocybin? You know, why isn't MAPS doing that with MDMA? It's like, what's the ketamine, guys? Elizabeth had her hand up, and then I don't know how we are with time.
Yeah, I think we've got about 5 minutes left, Joe. So
okay.
Yeah, but Elizabeth, hi.
Yeah, hi. I'll try to be quick. Thanks for taking my question, Joe. I read your book, Fellowship of the River, and actually went down to Niue Rao a few years ago. So it had me thinking about this question, experiencing the Shipibo tradition where there's so much preparation around the container, the space. And so you're in the Maloka, and it's very clear that the safe place is to be in the Maloka where the shamans are holding that space, whether it be from, you know, spiritual forces unseen or black magic. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are about this medical model that we're trying to use psychedelics in without any acknowledgement of such forces or any training on what to do with that. So I've had that part of my own spirituality and my belief systems thinking about that element. And so I was curious, given your background and training, if you've put any thought to that.
Sure. There's a lot of people that are, let me close this door back behind me. The family is arriving. There's a lot of people that are, concerned about that. And they say that, like, you were there with Ricardo and, it's pretty heavy duty and dealing with the energetic side of what it's like, to open up these spaces and these realms. And a lot of indigenous people in the United States, they bring it up as well, that they have to, like, you should address that stuff. That's important to address and be aware of those things. And so, what does that look like? I think what I see happening with PRATI and with other organizations like this is, like, they're open to that dialogue, so we've been waiting for these living traditions to be able to communicate directly with this. So it's like, where the psychedelic medicine doesn't have to happen in parallel to shamanic traditions, but they can actually interact with each other and inform each other. And so I think that the potential is opening up. Like my class that I'm writing, a class for U of A, Center for Integrated Medicine on psychedelic, I have it opened and closed by 2 Navajos because we're in Arizona and they're talking about the sacred elements that they feel like need to be addressed, and that they want to say that the ancestral wisdom teaches us that this is important. The science maybe one day will catch up to it, maybe it won't. We're trying to tell you this is important to address, when you work with this kind of stuff. That's what multi-generational experience has taught us. That being said, there's room for paranoia, like you can get carried away. Ricardo it's both, living there in the tradition where it's like, it's not always energy, it's not always witchcraft, it's not. But that is, so this is what I would say. This is my answer. This is if it came to me. I was going, so here I'm in Colombia, right? I'm visiting. My mom is at my aunt's house. My uncle just got home. So then my mom finds out that I'm going down to Peru. I'm going to, we hang out with Ricardo before Niue Rao. And we're going to start building Niue Rao. Ricardo tells me, let's do it. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And you saw it, you were there, it's something, right? It's really something. And so my mom says, Joe, I don't want you going down there because, los brujos, like there's witches down there, Joe, there's sorcerers, there's that kind of energy. I don't want you going down. You don't know what you're dealing with down there. Don't go be around those people. That's because in Colombia, that's what they say, they have it. They're here. And so people, not just Catholic racist stuff, but like real fear of the people that know something, dark. So then I was kind of like, what do I do? What am I going to do? And then I ran into Malidoma Somé, as a perfect example of like an African traditional healer that is educated, and is deciding to teach energetic, spiritual, ancestral medicine to people, like metaphysics, he's not just saying whatever for belief and blah blah blah. He's saying this is real. Like this could affect your health. And I, for whatever it's worth, it's something to learn about. It's something to experience. Some people have had really amazing experiences with Malidoma Somé and his students. I personally did. It changed my life. So I asked Malidoma. I said, Malidoma, my mom says, that I shouldn't go down there because the witches and blah blah blah. And and I know you're from Africa and I know you guys know your way around that stuff. And what can you tell me? And he said, Malidoma, I think he died last year. He just died. He's like, the witches, the evil doers. He's like, if they're not around, it's not real. He's like, so they're always around. There's always that kind of stuff, around. Says your best protection against that is your integrity. You know, so when people bring integrity to their psychedelic medicine spaces, it is that, you know, it is the white magic. And I could tell you for myself that I went down and I've faced down all kinds of Amazonian sorcerers, you know, and it's been through the hells of the Amazon. And integrity goes a long ways, you know. And so, and that's what I tell Ricardo sometimes, hey, you're going to sing out, you're going to clean all the energy and do the magic. And it's so amazing. But hey, you told the client that you made that pipe. You didn't make that pipe. Why did you tell him that? You know, he thinks that's just like a funny little joke for him. Like, they're like, oh, did you make it? Oh, yeah, I made the pipe here. You know, like, don't do that. You know, don't do that, Ricardo. You know, then we have to clean the maloca again. So that's what I would say. Like, so then when I'm around people that have strong integrity, like I would say, that's my experience around the PRATI, you know, experience. I wasn't like in some paranoia of like, oh my God, we open up the realms and now, you know, the evil is going to come because no one's paying attention. I was like, no, these people have their like hearts all the way on. And that goes a long, long ways. You know, that's what I would say. You know, I think that we, as long as we encourage integrity at the highest levels and the deepest heart and soul, then the energetic it starts to come up as we open up these discussions. Then you start, I could say, hey, Jamie, it feels kind of weird over on that side of the room. You know, I don't know what that is. And you could start talking to each other about that, you know, or you finish out the healing with somebody. Wow, man, I feel sick. Like, I don't feel good since I work with that person. That was really hard for me. So you start addressing that stuff, you know, slowly you relearn like how to make room for that discussion and that dialogue more and more. But on our way there, like, you know, the integrity, it does help, you know, and I could say that because I walked in there to deal with all that stuff. And now, you know, that was the number one thing that I had. So I told my mom, I feel like I'm ready to go. It's okay. But it was scary still. It gets scary down there, doesn't it, Elizabeth? Yes, it does.
Thank you for that.
Wow. Wow. So beautiful, Joe. So beautiful. Walking with integrity. And I think it's, you know, for me, it's just like connecting into the love, like feeling that source, the mystery, spirit, and holding that central. My guess is everyone on this call wish we could have a whole other hour. And unfortunately, we can't, right? But if you want to learn more about PRATI or look at some of other webinars, go to our website. It's just been such a joy hosting Joe here tonight, and hopefully you'll join us for other webinars. But Joe, travel well, enjoy your family.
Yeah.
And just I can't wait to be with you again, hear all the goodbyes. So gratitude for everyone here, and gratitude to you. So thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. There's somebody wrote asking about treatment in Italy. I'm not aware of direct resources in Italy myself, but just to reply to the chat. Thank you.
All right.
All right. We'll see everybody soon.
Take care, everyone.
Soon. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks,
night.
Scott. Jason. Bye-bye.